The old Steam controller may not have seemed like a hit, but it did successfully revolutionize controller support on PC. Back then, X input was the only game in town, and customization meant using software like Joy to Key and hoping for the best. The Steam controller established that every input on your gamepad is yours to use as you see fit. It made Gyro aim accessible on PC for the first time, and the trackpads did prove incredibly versatile. I still use them to scroll while narrating. Because I'm not fucking AI! Unfortunately, the controller fell short of Valve's goal of a universal gamepad. Without a real D-pad, side-scrollers were non-starters, though the trackpad works better than you'd expect. The mushy inputs also made it unsuitable for button-heavy games. Despite its great ideas, the number of titles I actually used it on was small. The Steam Deck mostly fixed those problems, so naturally the new pad is mostly the same thing with the deck part cut off. Or is it? Valve always iterates and improves with each device, and this one is no exception. The first thing that struck me when unboxing is that the controller isn't as bulky as it looks. The grips have a more conventional shape than the first gen, and the size falls into a Goldilocks zone between the Switch 2 Pro and DualSense. It's still early, but I think I prefer it to either pad. The controller weighs more than Gen 1, but it doesn't feel like it in hand due to better balancing. The old shape was bottom heavy, while the new pad distributes its mass evenly. It's no small feat to make so many inputs comfortable at once, and my one ergonomics complaint is that I wish the trackpads were set farther inward. You still have to shift your grip to reach them, but it's at least more comfortable to do than on the deck. That's partly because they've been rotated for better placement, but their output hasn't been. A horizontal line in-game cuts across the squares at an angle, and a parallel line on the pad skews the movement in-game. You probably won't notice it unless you're looking down, but in any case you can change the rotation angle to match the pad if it bothers you. The joysticks are TMR types made by K-Silver, making Valve the first major platform holder to use magnetic sticks since Sega. And while opinions vary, some of the comparisons I've seen online claim these are among the best in production. Drifting sticks create opportunities to sell new controllers or replacements with absurd markups, and it's refreshing to see someone build a gamepad to last without playing the planned obsolescence game. Like on the deck, the sticks are wired for capacitive touch sensing. This is mostly used for recentering the gyro, but it can be used as a toggle for any action you want. Valve has expanded on this with grip sensing, which allows pausing the gyro while keeping your thumb free to use other inputs. Or it can do things like automatically pause the game when the controller is put down. When every other input is full, a shift of your hands could be used to send 2 extra button commands the same way. Zelda's Ocarina has never felt right on dual analog controllers, but I can use the grips to dynamically change the face buttons into C buttons with a slight hand opening, and back again with a grip. And Steam of course allows you to tweak the sensors to change the scale of motion needed. The trackpads are smaller than the first controller, but they have better response times and overall feel. Valve claims the haptics are substantially improved over Gen 1, which used the same LRA design as the Joy-Cons. The new design resembles the one in the deck OLED, which itself was upgraded from the LCD. The most immediate difference isn't the strength but the speed of the rumble. The response is instantaneous now. It's hard to demo things like this over a video, but here's a sound comparison. In the past, Valve emulated Game Rumble using the trackpads, which competed with the tactile feedback meant for your thumb. Now there are grip haptics to exclusively cover Game Rumble, and they look very similar to the LRAs in the DualSense. That suggests they should be strong, but unfortunately there isn't a single usable example for testing that I'm aware of. Apart from Queen. Maybe fat-bottomed girls would have been a better choice. You can give the haptics a workout by playing MIDI files, and without being able to directly compare to other pads, the bass is indeed powerful. Haptic feedback needs special APIs to work, which PC doesn't really have. This is not Valve's fault. Microsoft's ancient controllers have no concept of motion, touch, or audio-based haptics, so X input doesn't either. Better APIs like SDL have gained a footing but aren't as widely used. Microsoft's X input replacement seems promising but is even less established. The DualSense bypasses these hurdles with a direct USB connection to the game, but that support is exclusive to that pad. Valve intends for developers to deliver haptics through Steam input, but native support for the API hasn't been great.
If your engine already has something like X input support in place, our hope is that you'll be able to drop this in really easily.
After 12 years, I can count the number of examples in my library on one hand. Valve's new hardware may inspire more dev support, but I fear the haptics might largely go unused, unless you drop it a lot. Back buttons are a great idea that somehow always underwhelms. The first Steam controller required bending the entire grip. It was useful and awful at once. The deck improved on this with real buttons, but the weight of the system made it harder to shift your fingers to them. All 4 of the new buttons are effortless to reach without being prone to accidental presses. It's the first time back buttons have really worked for me, and using them doesn't disrupt gyro aim. You can use these to avoid ever clicking an analog stick again, but you could also put all 4 face buttons here to keep your thumb on the stick. The shoulder buttons have just the right amount of pop and are easier to reach than the narrow ones on the DualSense. These are also massively improved from the stiff bumpers on the first gen. The D-pad is always a point of concern for any new controller. A lot of people get this wrong, a lot of people. A wobble test revealed some unwanted diagonals, but I was pleased with how it performed in-game when trying complicated actions. It's not the best I've ever used, but it should be good enough for most people. But I didn't want to settle for good enough, because I'm an asshole. So I destroyed the warranty on the expensive new device to do a tape mod. The controller has been praised for its repairability, but that doesn't mean it's easy to get into. Just that it's a clean layout considering its complexity. It takes specific tools to open. 2 of the screws were too deeply set for my driver to reach, so I had to start the bit by hand and then only partially seat it in the handle. Apparently I didn't buy enough crap from iFixit. Many screws later, the D-pad was exposed. My test showed the most bad inputs on up, so I used the most tape there. When a contact needs a lot of blocking, you can stick the tape onto plastic and cut a wedge out so the contact center won't be covered up. I was a little conservative with the tape because I didn't want to have to open this up again, but you can safely cover more. The result was a noticeably improved diagonal test, and I was able to wall jump the entire escape shaft on my first try. It was also more repeatable than on any other controller I have. It's not for the faint of heart, but if you have an hour and a Torx driver, this can go from a good to great D-pad. Valve claims a worst-case scenario battery life of 35 hours, which aligns with my impressions. I dove into testing without waiting for a full charge, and the battery was still half full after a week of heavy usage. One obvious complaint is that the desktop UI has no battery indicator, meaning big picture mode has to be loaded to check. It's a needless annoyance that hopefully gets addressed soon. Charging can be done over USB, but Valve has included a magnetic puck for convenience. It leaps onto the controller on its own, and has been designed not to do the same when upside down. Its magnets do interfere with the TMR sticks when attached, but Valve applies a software offset to correct for this. I would still just avoid playing while the puck is attached. You should also avoid leaving metallic objects nearby. I've found it sticks to loose USBs, and there is an apparent risk of fire if it latches onto something with a battery. It's a cool idea with some big uh-ohs. The puck also doubles as a 2.4 GHz radio with a cable generous enough to span any desk. I initially found it concerningly sensitive to interference. Just moving the gamepad to my lap degraded the signal by 25 dBm. This seems to have been improved after firmware updates, but it's still worth testing different placements out before you start gaming. My only real complaint with the controller itself is that it's hard to go back to stick post grinding after getting used to Switch 2's zero friction gates, but the usable D-pad and TMR more than make up for that. Judged strictly as a standard gamepad, the quality is on par with any first-party competitor. Of course, this is not a controller you buy for standard inputs, and I think most gamers still don't grasp how important those weird other features are. An analog stick only has 1 inch of tilt diameter, and some of that is sacrificed to a dead zone to cover potentiometer drift. Even with TMR, a null point is needed because the sticks don't snap exactly back into place each time. The start and stop levels of tension around the center lead to a wobbly, jolting cursor. This input is great for simple character movement, but it's not viable for aiming without layers of assist applied. A trackpad has more space for movement and no dead zone or tension changes. Gliding your thumb over the center is as smooth as anywhere else. You can make mouse-like movements and stop on a dime in a way that's just not possible when tilting a stick. Valve also enables trackball emulation by default. Rather than repeatedly swiping to do large movements, you can flick the pad and let it freely spin until you face the direction you want. It takes some getting used to, but it's a critical part of making a small surface area work for any scale of movement. Steam hardware is the definitive way to control Metroid Prime. In the official remaster, you have to hold a button to shift the D-pad between visors and beams. Here, you effectively have 2 D-pads to accommodate those options. Waggle controls can be handled with a back button. You can fire a missile into a trackball 360 before it impacts, and you can map jump to the pad itself so that you never have to stop aiming. Clicking a flat pad is far more comfortable than a stick. It just feels like a big button. Gen 1 had a stiff physical pop that was upgraded to a squish on the deck, using haptics to make the click threshold customizable. Now there's no give at all. Any sense of a press is derived from the haptics. I was concerned about how this would feel, but it works just fine in game. If the mouse emulation stuff doesn't interest you, there's bound to be something else the trackpads can do. Entering text on a controller is always a major pain. The trackpads speed this up with split keyboard texting. It's not my favorite way to type, but it's a hell of a lot less tedious than a D-pad. Resident Evil 5 allows 4 items on the D-pad, leaving 5 spots on its inventory grid that have to be manually navigated. The trackpad can become the grid, making all 9 slots accessible with a quick tap. Zelda's inventory can also be streamlined. Instead of holding the D-pad and sticks, the menus can open on pad contact, with weapons on one and shields on the other. Systems with touchscreens can use the pad and mouse region mode to lock the cursor to the second screen boundaries. This way the corners of the pad correspond to the corners of the inventory. It's like having a shrunken down touchscreen beneath your thumb. This setup is a natural fit for Kid Icarus Uprising, which already had trackball-like controls on 3DS. Emulators in general greatly benefit from the extra inputs. If you think Star Fox Zero is worth saving, you can restore the classic scheme with banking on the triggers while using the back buttons to handle screen swaps. You could blend trackpad aiming with the gyro to reduce the amount of motion required, or replace it outright. And this is only a surface level demo of the modes available. If you're willing to experiment, there's endless potential for the trackpads to enhance your games. Most players will probably be more familiar with gyro thanks to Nintendo's games. It also allows fluid mouse-like movement, but tilting gives you a much wider range than your thumb on a trackpad. It's less stable, but if you can keep your hand steady, it's one of the fastest ways to aim. I compared every current gyro to see if a difference emerged, and the first was that the Switch 2 Pro has remarkably low noise versus the others, often below Steam's calibration threshold. That magnetometer eats, fam. Another observation is that auto-calibration cannot be disabled on either Steam controller. It's apparently run at the firmware level on the pad, not via Steam. There have been reports of overzealous calibration during gameplay, and while I didn't notice the issue in my tests, it absolutely is there. The gyro centers itself during slow movements, and when released it falsely thinks it's moving the opposite direction for a moment before calibrating again. Valve needs to fix this, and hopefully it can be done with a software update rather than an RMA. Especially after I, fucked everything up with tape. I used 2 tests in AimLab. One is a reflex test for general handling. The other is a motion test with small moving targets, which seemed like a good way to bring out controller shake issues. I waited until my scores plateaued and then recorded 6 tests on each pad, calibrating the gyro every session. My joystick results were pathetic, but I wanted to include them as a baseline. You'll notice the camera movement here is all linear swipes. This type of aim is all about tilting the right direction and holding the right amount of time. It's possible to get good results with it, but it's objectively terrible at making fluid motions. If you don't land on target, you're screwed. I'm not a mouse player and these scores also won't impress anyone, but I handily beat the stick results and more than doubled the motion test scores. The speed is great and the movement is less stiff, but there's still friction that makes it hard to make precise adjustments. Granted, I'm using an office mouse without high-end glide pads. The trackpads kept up with the mouse reasonably well in the reflex test, but dropped harder on the motion test. This aligned with my experience of them being great for camera movement but poor for aiming, which is why gyro complements them so well. My lowest ranked gyro pad was the DualSense, mainly because the high trigger tension is fatiguing and muddles shot timing. You can map fire to something else, but not when using native support over USB. I consider this a comprehensive test of the whole controller, so the trigger is fair game. The old Steam controller scored within margin of error of it, but the lighter analog pull is more comfortable. Plus, something about the big grips makes pointing more natural. The sensor did have the most trouble with drift though, and it being a dead product doesn't help with its ranking. The Switch 2 Pro achieved markedly higher scores and the highest average on the motion test, probably thanks to the digital triggers and lightweight. The advantage of the 9-axis sensor is drift correction, so it probably wasn't a major contributor in a short test like this, but it would matter for longer sessions. It's currently held back by needing to be wired on Steam, but it's clearly a strong gyro performer. The new Steam controller got slightly lower motion scores than Switch 2, probably due to the analog pull, but it achieved a higher top score in the reflex test. The two are practically tied, but the better PC support and capacitive toggles give the Steam controller the edge, with the assumption that the calibration issue gets fixed. These are obviously subjective results that won't apply to other players, but the new Steam controller took my #1 spot. I was a huge fan of the Wii's IR aiming and wanted to see how it held up so many years later. It ruled. This IR camera eats, fam. 676767. It's even less stable than Gyro, but the speed is higher and the VR-like pointing action is extremely intuitive. Unfortunately, it's not practical to actually use in games. Wii U Pro bugs out and loses track of the cursor. There are too few buttons, and the sensor bar needs a few feet of distance to work. This is not something you can comfortably do at a desk. And while it achieved the top scores in both tests, the averages were extremely similar to Gyro, which surprised me because I always felt like there was a wide gap. IR aiming deserved to survive longer than one generation, but the convenience of Gyro is worth the slight performance reductions I saw. All of these aim types are best set as a mouse in Steam, and this is where you'll likely run into problems. Old games are confused by mixed input, and Resident Evil 5 kept launching split-screen sessions with Chris on keyboard and Sheva on joystick. Sometimes mods can fix these issues, other times you might have to go with full keyboard mappings and give up analog movement. This is also not Valve's fault. They've been asking developers to stop doing this for over a decade.
So it's important that your game be able to handle simultaneous gamepad and mouse input. And you also want to make sure that the in-game hint icons don't flicker back and forth depending on what the last active input was.
What Valve can be blamed for is the buggy, clumsy UI. My past configs briefly showed up before they didn't, and Steam had to be restarted to get them to appear again. Configs have been bugging out like this since the deck launch, and it's disappointing that not much has changed. At one point, the Steam controller was recognized as a Switch Pro despite going through the puck, and from then on it was permanently ID'd that way. Even forgetting and repairing didn't fix it. In fact, all of my controllers show up as Switch Pros now. Some menus won't scroll far enough to reveal every option, whether on gamepad or a mouse, and resizing the window still isn't enough. The interface itself remains an unintuitive downgrade from the original Steam input. There you could easily set mode shifts for any input along with the button that would activate them. After setting up the C button action set I demoed earlier, I could not figure out how to actually use it. No activator option is shown at any point in the set creation, nor in the action sets menu. It can be found by going to the input you want to use for the swap, tabbing through the menus to find the action sets, then linking the input with the action set there. It seems clunky to divorce the most critical action set mapping from action set creation, and that typifies the Steam input UI. If anyone from Valve happens to see this, please consider a third pass on this interface, because squirreling settings away into dozens of separate menus isn't working. There are also performance bugs that ruin otherwise great layouts. The Kid Icarus cursor frequently stopped responding to the trackpad, and the gyro mouse defaulted to an off-screen position with inverted axes in Star Fox. And for whatever reason, Steam's own invert settings had no effect. I could not reproduce either issue when using an actual mouse. Normally, mouse gyro isn't needed thanks to SDL, but many apps are using older, pre-Steam controller versions. In these cases, the buttons default to keyboard output that isn't mappable. Apps that are up to date with SDL will work out of the box. Support is about 50-50 in my emulators. Older and less active apps will have to be launched through Steam or a third-party program to use the controller. If new game developers continue ignoring Steam input, SDL or game input might come to support the full Steam controller feature set as a backup, but developers seem more interested in the DualSense than either API. Most third-party games have a PS5 version that they can copy and paste from, which has left Sony's controller with the most gyro and haptic support on PC. And we're finally reaching the point where the native gyro controls are actually good. After experiencing that alongside full haptics in Requiem, it's hard to go back to the buggier mouse gyro and standard rumble on the Steam controller. I'd also choose the DualSense for Final Fantasy VII, though I'd prefer the Steam pad if the haptics worked. If Valve added a mode to present the Steam controller to games as a DualSense, then it could tap into a lot of existing feature support, and some smaller apps have already achieved something similar. So in summary, the hardware itself is great. It's almost everything I was hoping it would be. The software is still a buggy mess, and there are lingering questions about the level of native support the controller will get. The upside is that software can be changed, and I've counted 8 firmware updates already. All of that considered, I still think this is a worthwhile purchase as it is today. You're getting capacitive TMR sticks, capacitive haptic grips, haptic trackpads, strong gyro performance with one big asterisk, great battery life, low latency, and 4 good back buttons. No rival gamepad has a feature set like this, and as long as you actually explore and use those features, it's worth the premium Valve is asking for. If you can buy one. If AI doesn't decide it needs these parts too. If you'll even have a PC to use it on. If the world doesn't fully end. It's only partially ending at the— oh, there goes the rest.
Yarr, you bilge-sucking scallywags! Hand over all your doubloons, or you walk the plank! Blimey! Avast ye! Retreat! Abandon ship! You seagull!
Dominate tech security.
I'm onto you, Gaben. I'm going to sue you again. You're going down, my friend. This is the one. I can feel it. You're gonna be so sorry.
You are entering the Strait of Hormuz. Turn back now or face destruction. You are entering the Strait of Hormuz. Turn back now or face destruction.
Gabe, we think we've got the Steam Machine price sorted, and it's gonna—
What?
It's going to have to be 2,000.
Yeah.